Hello everybody, this is week 5, almost done with Intro to Anthropology. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. So this week we're going to be doing chapters 5 and 6. You might want to understand why I've done the weeks the way I've done it. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 11, 7, 9, and 5, 6. So in the chapters, they do it according to big to more specific. I like to do the more specific things first, like gender and race, the things that we consider kind of primary to our identities, and deconstruct those a little bit before moving on to like bigger things, including religion, family systems, and now economics and politics. But first, in the video layout, we want to do a recap of week 4. Religion is a control mechanism for governing behavior. It explains our origins, and it provides the rituals and rites of passage that we live by and consider what's sacred, profane, taboo, and forbidden. We learned that culture is integrated. Religion sets out the rules for kinship relationships, especially the rite of passage called marriage. We learned that religion is also connected to health practices, what medications we can take, if we can receive blood transfusions. And we ask the question, if a person could be culturally religious without believing in God, do they celebrate Christmas? Do they celebrate Hanukkah? But do they consider themselves Christian or Jewish? And can a religion be non-religious and be the ultimate concern of such things like science or the nation? And how do our origin myths tell us who we are and what is sacred or profane? We learned that kinship relationships are socially constructed. And that's not to say that not all cultures have a family, but the blood ties are differently constructed in different systems. But we learned that incest taboos are universals, because even though blood ties are different, all systems have blood tie relationships. This week, we're going to talk about the economy and politics, and like all the weeks so far, these are both really big topics. But the names you need to know. You really need to know Econ because he developed the terms adaptive strategies to think about economic systems. So what does that mean? Adaptive strategies are basically regarding food production. So Cohen came up with the systems of foraging, horticulture, pastoral, and agriculture. We also know that there was a development of the Industrial Revolution, so industry, technology, and of course there's always been trade throughout the world. Another name you need to know is Karl Marx. You probably have heard this name, but may not yet know why Karl Marx is such a big name. Well, Karl Marx was one of the co-authors of the Communist Manifesto, and this was a critique of the capitalist economic system. He divided groups basically into two classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie were landowners, not of the royalty, but quickly overcoming them in power and influence because of their investment into businesses. The proletariat became what Karl Marx labeled the disenfranchised worker, because they were no longer connected to the land that they were working on, even if they didn't own it. Previously, the states were agriculturally based. The Industrial Revolution pushed these landless peasants into the factories. Another person who's very important in talking about economics and politics is Max Weber. Now Max Weber, spelled with a W, pronounced like a V. Weber. Max Weber's argument was that states that had the majority Protestant religion were primed to become capitalist systems. Max Weber also talks about the social stratification, and one of the things that he talks about are the 3 aspects of wealth, power, and prestige. Wealth, power, and prestige, you can see. I'm going to give you 3 examples. A basketball player, a Secretary of State, and the Pope. Now, the Pope is somebody who has a lot of prestige because he's somebody who is well respected in the world, regardless of your religion. The Secretary of State, especially in this case with Hillary Clinton, had a lot of political power, but as you can see, especially as the results of the past election, didn't have a lot of respect or prestige with the American people. Dwayne Wade, however, has a lot of money, maybe some prestige, but probably not too much political power. Pierre Bourdieu is also in the book, but very, very small. I like Bourdieu because he expands class. You might be able to compare Max Weber and Pierre Bourdieu systems. Max Weber talks about power, wealth, and prestige, whereas Pierre Bourdieu talks about economic capital, social capital, and cultural capital. So definitely you can compare economic capital with wealth. Social capital is definitely about how much power one has in society. Cultural capital can be seen as prestige. The other thing that makes Pierre Bourdieu's argument very interesting is the aspect of climbing the social ladder. We as Americans have the idea that anybody can pull themselves up by the bootstraps and climb the social ladder and be a success in life. However, it is very rare that somebody actually does this. And it's not because the people on top are cutting the rungs of the social ladder. Pierre Bourdieu argues that not everybody can do this social climb. If you start from the bottom, there's very, very little chance that you're going to go to 100 in your lifetime. It is simply because where we start often determines how far we move up. There are exceptions to the rule. There are people born without anything that become millionaires. And there are millionaires who fall. But for the majority of us, we start in a certain place, and there's only a certain range where we will end up. We can excel. I'll take my case, for example. I grew up upper working class, and now almost have my PhD. It's been a difficult struggle, but I'm here. Whereas somebody else could be upper working class, and they just don't get the jobs that they wanted. They start having a drinking problem, and they end up a little bit lower socioeconomically than their parents did. The last name to know is Emil Durkheim. We already talked about Durkheim a little bit, but he also made a great connection for capitalism, and that was between capitalism and suicide. Durkheim noticed that suicide rates increased in capitalist societies. This might be in part due to Karl Marx's idea of disenfranchisement of the worker. And it also might be due to Weber's idea of Christian guilt based on this individualism. Nobody's fault but my own. What do I do with it? So those are the people you need to know. The videos this week really show how political and economic systems are integrated. These videos also give some great insights on how we came into our current political system and economic systems, and some negatives that occurred as a result, whether that be consumerism, increased poverty, and increased violence. So the economic system. The first thing I want to say is that in pre-industrial societies, the economy is based on food production. The Cohen's typologies come in very handy. Foraging are for hunter-gatherer communities. Horticulture is about crop rotation, or even village rotation, so that the land can rejuvenate. Pastoralism are herders for domestic animals. And agriculture then becomes a next layer of horticulture where the land is continuously and intensively put to use. And then comes industrialism, and we have technology and factory production. Now, I'm going to add in here again that inside of all of these cultures there is trade. No group is ever isolated within our societies that they only ever interact with each other. So when two groups come in contact with each other, there's going to be trade. Political systems. The second thing I want to say is that these adaptive economic systems correlate very nicely to various political systems. That's not to always say that they're an exact match, nor is it to imply that there is an evolution of social structures or political systems. Bands are a small kinship-based group and typically survive by foraging. Tribes. Because they're going to do one of two things in their food production. They're going to be horticulturalists, or they're going to be pastoralists, which are going to be herders. Chieftains, they're larger communities with intensive food needs. Agriculture becomes the main sustenance, and of course, trade economy grows. Chieftains are a formal type of government structure where we first start seeing hereditary inheritance of power. So states are even larger, and there is a very small difference between states as was pre-industrial, what you might consider kingdoms. These would be considered states, and they were still agriculturally based and were larger than chiefdoms. The thing that makes them different than chiefdoms are that they encompass different groups of land. But so these states are large chieftain-type societies, with a high degree of social stratification. So there's a large difference between the king and the landless peasant. These economies were also based on intense agriculture right up until the Industrial Revolution. And then we start seeing a lot more nation states. So bringing it all together, the majority of the world is comprised of nation states. There's a great article that I want you to read next week, although it would have fit nicely into this week as well, about the hierarchy of nation states. So I want to focus on the big political systems and the big political picture that exists today, so we can match this integrated culture with religions and economic systems. So we already learned about the religious systems last week, the 5 big ones, but we're going to say 6. Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, Hinduism, and then we're going to add atheism to it, because there's over 1 billion practitioners of atheism. There's 4 types of economic systems. We're going to cut one out of the picture because it's called the traditional economic system. The next 3, or the next 2, are ones that you might already have an idea about. One is the market economy. It's a capitalist economy. This type of economy is based on the free market, where there is no government intervention on what products can be manufactured or the cost of that item. Prices are determined by what a person is willing to pay. Taxes are typically high, and there's no protection of the elderly or the disabled. You might be surprised by this. There are no complete market economies that exist in the world. There is no nation state that doesn't do some type of government intervention within the economy. Another is command economy. These might be mostly associated with communist or socialist governments. These types of economy promote complete state intervention. The government owns all significant industries. They plan exactly what will be manufactured. They set the wages for workers. They fix the prices for products. The citizens do not pay taxes. And then there's a mixed economy. So really, there's only these 2 market economies and command economies, and then everybody else is mixed. Well, everybody else is mixed anyways, because this is a combination of market and command economies. Well, we already know that there's no true market economy that exists in the world today. So there's always going to be some sort of government intervention or some sort of command economics involved. Since there are really no true market economies nor any complete communist economies, all nation states can be said to have a mixed economic system, although to a greater or lesser extent. Countries like Norway have a lot of social programs like socialized medicine combined with market economy, and the US as well has social programs including federal minimum wage and Social Security for the elderly and disabled inside the capitalist economy. There are also 4 types of political systems. So the 4 types of political systems are monarchy. Although in the past monarchs held absolute power, most modern monarchies are now constitutional monarchies, which give monarchs greater or lesser power in combination typically with a parliamentary power system. Islamic nations are the notable exception where there is often a monarch who is both king and prime minister. Communist systems are single-party authoritarian systems. Like monarchies, communist heads of state are not chosen by the people and will stay in that position until he or she abdicates or dies. China is the closest example we have today of a true communist government, since North Korea, which we also consider communist, actually holds regular elections, although without any oppositional parties. A dictatorship is another type of authoritarian government, but unlike communist systems, are not restricted by constitutions or parliaments. Military dictatorships, such as in Spain with Franco, Italy with Mussolini, and in Latin America, no longer exist today. But monarchies of Islam, communist China, single-party systems like Russia, they're still considered dictatorships in some political analysis. And then we come to the republic. The most common political system in the world today is called a republic. These governments are accountable to the citizens being governed. To a greater or lesser extent, the citizens have the power to legally change, recall, or remove the leader in certain circumstances, whether through voting or referendum. There are different types of republics. One, for example, is the crowned republic, or what we just mentioned as a constitutional monarchy. This is where the king or queen holds ceremonial power, in such places like Norway or the United Kingdom. Single-party republics would be exemplified in a country like Russia. Other candidates are allowed to run if they don't threaten the election of Putin. and are therefore mostly for show. This is evident in Alexei Navalny being barred from running in the presidential election in Russia in 2018. Parliamentary republics have a parliamentary government system that is headed by an appointed prime minister, is considered the political leader of the country. Whereas members of parliament are elected, the prime minister is chosen by the head of state, which can be a monarch, such as the Queen of England. Parliamentary systems always have a secondary system of power or a head of state. Other parliament systems include Canada and India. Federal republics contain a federation, or a group of states, provinces, or territories that make up the nation-state. Federal republics have one elected leader that is over all other systems, typically called the president. Examples include United States and Mexico. So democracy. You might be wondering why I didn't mention democracy as a political system. Well, democracy is a political system, but it's actually the system that allows each citizen to participate in the selection of the elected head of government. So any system considering itself a republic could consider itself democratic because it allows people to vote, including Russia or the Vatican City. So combining religions, economics, and political systems, we get a variety of world cultures. We have Iran that has an autocratic parliamentary theocracy, Islamic religion, with a more command-based economic system. We have Israel, which is democratic parliamentary system, Jewish religion, with a more market-based economic system. You have North Korea with a single-party republic, traditional Chinese-based religion, with a command economic system. And then you have the USA, democratic federal republic, Christian-dominated religious system, and a more market-based economy. So you might think this is a big jump because of the discussion board. The methodology this week is a simple survey, but maybe not so simple. I'm asking you to take a survey on gun laws and give it to 5 other students. Please print this survey 5 times, then you take it to your fellow students and ask them if they will participate in this survey. You ask the questions and write down their responses. Please post your results in the discussion board, and as the peer review process, you guys can discuss if there was any sampling bias because the sample was so small, and what your group results might be if combined all together. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure. One more week to go. Bye-bye now.